Right. Well, you can start whenever you're ready. Yeah, I don't think we can hear you right now. I still can't hear you. I could for a second, but not right now. No, I can't hear you. Let's see.
Do you think like rejoining the link, like exiting and then rejoining would work?
She can't hear anyone either.
How about now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Can you hear
Oh,
us?
yes.
Awesome.
Technology, guys, isn't it?
I
It's
know.
amazing and it is also kind of troublesome sometimes. But hey,
Yes.
we're here.
Yes.
So sorry everyone for all the hiccups with the time change and the technology things. But yeah, you might have already kind of given an intro or anything like that. But is there anything that you kind of wanted to talk through before I start filling in my background and my time right now as a University of Utah sports dietitian?
No, I think we're good, but I'm excited to hear from you.
Okay, awesome. So one, super excited to talk with Georgia State University students because, of course, I was a graduate, did both my undergrad and master's degree, the coordinated program back I started college in 2008, so it's been a little while. Um, I loved my time at Georgia State. I think it actually prepared me really well for a lot of the things that I'm doing now. So, to give you guys a little bit of a background, I was an athlete at Georgia State. I actually ran track and field, and that's getting into sports was what really prompted me to want to get into nutrition, really seeing that link between fueling yourself and performance. And my time at Georgia State as an athlete was a little bit up and down, to say the least. We had a lot of coaching changes. And if you don't mind me disclosing, I also struggled myself with some disordered eating. And I really, I don't mind sharing a little bit of my personal story because I think that really plays into how I got to where I am professionally. So, I started actually not wanting to pursue sports nutrition by the time I was finishing up all of my degrees, mainly because I, kind of had like a really bad taste in my mouth from some of the experiences that I'd had and knew that I needed to probably heal a little bit myself before I started working with athletes. So, I actually did about 14 months of a clinical job where I was the only dietitian at one of the DeKalb Hillendale locations. Um, and then I did 4 years of pediatric nutrition with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So, really, really strong clinical background. It helps me a lot now troubleshooting because most of our guys are um, weight gain type guys. We're really trying to emphasize body composition changes. So it's interesting that a lot of the um, kids that we were seeing who are maybe failure to thrive, malnourished, some of the strategies that I'm using for those kids are just the same that I'm using for a lot of the big kids, I say, that I'm seeing now. So I left Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And by the way, I was doing both GI disorders, and if anyone has maybe rotated with the multidisciplinary feeding program, fantastic experience. I highly, highly recommend it. But um, my husband and I moved to Denver, Colorado, about 6 weeks before the pandemic. So I was already working virtually with a place called Stat Wellness in Atlanta, which does a lot of functional nutrition and functional medicine things. And that's whenever I started to dive into sports nutrition. So I worked with a sports dietitian in Denver. His name's Bob C. Bahar. He does a lot of metabolic efficiency training, which is really interesting. Um, I started working with my sports dietitian. Do you all familiar with my sports dietitian?
I'm not. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
Yeah. Highly, highly, highly recommend getting involved with them because they do a lot of student intern opportunities. So I actually started interning with them first, even though I've been a seasoned dietitian for a while. I really wanted to get, I was really going full tilt into sports. And my sports dietitian does a lot of virtual consulting with both individual athletes and with teams. So they've had several reiterations of it, but it's amazing because it's a great networking opportunity. So, for instance, I got placed on a team with the dietitian from the Phoenix Suns, dietitian with LA Galaxy, dietitian with the Timberwolves and Minnesota Wild. I've got to meet Pratik Patel. So, like, there's just a lot of great networking opportunities within my sports dietitian that I would absolutely recommend. Um, and I just kind of kept pursuing piecemealing certain opportunities in the sports world, and just kind of kept saying, what else can I do to help further along? So I actually started to virtually do some work with some volunteer work with the San Francisco 49ers. And then also started volunteering with the Colorado Buffaloes football team. So probably one thing that I would recommend is, even as a seasoned dietitian, I had a lot to offer from a lot of my clinical background and skill set as a nutrition counselor. I knew that I had to grow in sports, so I just kind of had I knew that I had to take some of those unpaid volunteer opportunities because I knew that they would pay off eventually. And so all of that really culminated to where I am now. I saw that there was a assistant director role for the University of Utah, and it was perfect because I knew that I wasn't probably ready for a full director of football nutrition role, not having, been full-time in football before. So it's been a perfect opportunity for me because I do have, as assistant director, underneath our director, and she's been at both the University of Georgia and Mizzou. So she's had a lot of great SEC experience. And yeah, they definitely knew the two experiences, like working with the San Francisco 49ers and with the Colorado Buffaloes. That was really what helped me stand out. And they actually really liked my clinical background. I think whenever we look at sports nutrition nowadays, there is a more holistic, high performance model. So being able to do things like interpret lab values, interpret body composition, um, any of those things we're really seeing is analyze research. Those are things that we're really seeing as being valuable skill sets within the field. So I'm happy to tell you, if anyone has any questions, by the way, please just absolutely, this is super informal on my end. Obviously, I don't have like a big presentation. And so if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I can tell you guys a little bit about what my day-to-day looks like, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love to know like what your day-to-day looks like if it varies or anything.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, as a sports dietitian in football, kind of like my role as a dietitian changes as the based on the time of year that we're in. So, as an example, I started mid-season in October of this past season, which is quite a time because, if you know anything about football, um, every week is just, you're just preparing for the next opponent. So long practices, lots of lifting sessions. So our primary goal during season is to minimize any type of muscle loss, maximize recovery, because they have a game each Saturday. And so depending on the position player, you could be getting a ton of reps, a ton of impact, and it takes time to recover from those things. So we want to make sure that by the time the next week rolls around, they've adequately recovered from protein, carbohydrate, inflammation, that sort of standpoint. Um, the other thing that we really do is coordinate all of the nutrition for on the road and even at home. So if anyone has any experience working with hotel vendors or any type of vendor, that's extremely valuable in the sports nutrition space. Before really getting into sports, I didn't know what a BEO was. Has anyone ever heard of a BEO? Yeah, so it's a banquet event order. So no matter if we're on the road or at home, we stay in a hotel the night before and obviously the day of the game. So we have an arrival dinner, we have a late night snack, we have breakfast, we have lunch, and then we have pregame meal. So think about, having a mini wedding. So essentially doing like, 120, 115 players, plus staff. You're essentially, creating menus for each one of those meals and then making sure that it's executed properly. So having really great communication with the on-site staff is so important. And being able to interpret what I said, those BEOs, the banquet event orders, because that gives you essentially the full rundown of what each meal is going to look like. So that's kind of a big part of our role. And then also having to take all of our supplies that we need from a pre halftime and post fueling operation on the road as well. So making sure we've got all of our hydration products, electrolytes, carbohydrate rich snacks, being prepared for if there is a weather delay. Do we have some sandwiches or Uncrustables or something we can feed the guys if we are delayed several hours? So in season, it's just a lot of rinse and repeat. And so we're not doing a lot of big changes nutritionally during the season. In fact, that's probably not the best time to do some of those changes. The season that we're in right now during winter conditioning, this is when it's probably even busier for the nutrition staff because the guys are really honed in on making a lot of those body composition changes. So we have a lot of weight gain guys. They're in winter conditioning, so they're working out pretty hard, pretty heavily, 3 days a week. And we're doing a lot of one-on-one nutrition consults for our hard to gain guys or hard to lean out guys. We just onboarded a lot of new freshmen. So you can actually start college a semester early if you're able to. So we're onboarding a lot of those new guys. Things that we're doing right now is, of course, providing all of our post-workout shakes. So we make about 80 shakes every lift period, which is quite a lot. So we do have some volunteers who help us out with that. But a big thing right now is just keeping the guys interested in nutrition. So as an example, we have a weight gain shake that's one that's a little bit on the healthier side and one that's a little more fun. So like right now we're doing a birthday cake batter flavored protein shake that we're making. And, last week we did brownie batter. Next week, I think we're doing red velvet for Valentine's Day. So, keeping these guys interested is really, really helpful. We're doing a lot of body composition. So we actually have a mobile DEXA scanner that comes and visits with us, and we're able to track some of these changes that we're making. And at our program, we're very, from the head coach down, we're a very weight centric focus that tends to not align quite as much with my personal nutrition philosophy. But, this is the role that I'm in. And so there are certain expectations that the coaching staff has. And so we meet weekly with our strength and conditioning staff, and then our director reports all of our body weights to our coaches, just as like basically, hey, from a nutrition standpoint, how are we, really helping support these guys right now? Let's see, other supplements that, other things that we're doing is we're really focusing on trying to improve the dining hall. We have an all athlete dining hall that's literally right across from my office, which is great. We have a new supplement routine. So we're actually giving all of our guys, no matter the position, fish oil, vitamin D, and a multivitamin. Let's see. Of course, a lot of our day-to-day stuff is making sure that our fuel bar downstairs, which is, where a lot of the guys have grab and go snacks, is where we make all of our shakes. We've been really making a lot of improvements down there, trying to get a lot more whole food ingredient type things instead of just prepackaged snacks. And the guys are responding really well to that. So I know that's a lot of information. I see that we have one question already. So, do you still work a regular job in the sports industry, or did you work a regular job in the sports industry while volunteering, either part-time or full-time? So I actually was doing a lot of virtual consulting with a functional medicine private practice, which had a women's focus. So I guess I would say I was part-time there and had really good pay from an hourly standpoint that allowed me to do some of this part-time volunteering. So I kind of did a little bit of both.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
So I was just curious what the meals looked like at those really big hotel events. Is it the same each time? Is it not?
Yeah. So both the director of sports nutrition, the director of football nutrition, her name is Tyler Roof. So she was hired literally the first week of the season. And then I was hired about 4 weeks after her. So between the two of us, a lot of the things that we do are planned out pretty far in advance. So as an example, we played in the Rose Bowl. The week after the Rose Bowl, we were already contacting hotel vendors, securing bids of where we were going to stay for this upcoming season. So we already planned out our menu for basically the entire season, 9 months in advance. So the menu that we inherited that was kind of already preset did not change very much. And I think that both the coaches and the players, they were giving us feedback that they would really want to see some different items. So that's what we're doing now, is we're kind of making some of those changes. So I'll give you an example of arrival dinner. So that's basically, we get off the plane, we get on the buses, and we go immediately to the hotel. There will always be a pasta action station, which has a lot of good vegetables, lean protein options. We typically do 3 proteins, normally some kind of chicken, salmon, and beef. And we basically let the chef determine, what they do best. So if they do, a miso ginger salmon really well, then that's what we want. We try to make things a little bit on the leaner side, so not a lot of heavy cream sauces or, big butter fried, that type of thing. And always have several carb options. We actually have white rice at every single meal. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, it doesn't matter. We always have white rice. We do have a good number of guys from Polynesian communities here at the University of Utah. And so culturally, we really want to respect that there are certain offerings that are typically found at a lot of Polynesian meals, white rice being one of those. So that's probably pretty common for our guys. They go through quite a bit every single meal. And then at that arrival dinner, we also have a huge salad bar. It's really, really balanced that first meal. We do like to switch things up just a little bit, but we also do allow the guys to have an ice cream bar. I know that that may not sound quite so nutrition from nutrition practice. It seems like sometimes a little bit contradictory, but if we're looking at optimizing these guys' carbohydrate stores, ice cream's a great way to do that. So, and it keeps them just really excited. And a lot of them are kind of, they're 18-year-old kids too. So they get excited about that kind of stuff. That late night snack that we have is normally about 10 p.m. That's where we like to get really creative. So, this time we're going to be doing things like pretzel bites and honey mustard, um, little like sliders, little burger sliders. We're doing flatbread pizzas, like a taco quesadilla bar one time. So that's the menu that's probably going to change the most each week. And then our pregame meal will always be the exact same. So um, we always do a chicken, a beef option, several different pasta options. We do a salad bar, but that's mostly for the coaches. A lot of the guys don't really do salad before. Um, and always broccoli, mashed potatoes, light gravy, rice. And then we do some things like Uncrustables or like small snacks for the guys who typically don't eat very much before. Everybody has a little bit of a different food tolerance, so we want to make sure we're optimizing those as well. I think, Jordan, you had a question?
Yes. So I was wondering, when dealing with such a big population, all those players, I'm sure some of them have food intolerances or allergies or just straight up don't eat certain food items. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So currently we're pretty fortunate. We do have a couple of peanut and tree nut allergies. So basically, on every menu, we just specify that we don't want any peanuts or tree nuts in any of the dishes. The only exception to that would be like a mixed nut trail mix type of option that's already prepackaged, so it's not going to contaminate things. Same thing with an Uncrustable, since it's already, prepackaged. Um, we don't have anyone right now who is allergic to the point of like if they're even exposed to it airborne can be allergic, so that's really nice. Um, let's see. A lot of the guys are, anytime that we have a good new guy coming in, we have our nutrition screener. And so we're always making sure that we have food out, like, we have all those allergies flagged. We do have guys that don't eat pork. And in fact, one of our uh, high level coaches does not eat pork. So we actually do not include pork on the menu. In mixed dishes, we do have something like bacon sometimes, or maybe pork loin, but nothing that's going to be accidentally exposing someone to that. Um, so yeah, that's the thing I would say is, we do a lot of education with our athletic training staff as well. So for instance, a lot of our athletic training staff actually carries a lot of the EpiPens for our players with food allergies. And we realized that they were actually not bringing those EpiPens into the meal room where we serve all of our meals. And I'm like, hey, this is probably where they're going to get exposed. It's not going to be at practice when they're exposed to it. It's going to be right here in this room. So we've now implemented that the athletic training staff will have those in there, and one member of the medical staff is always present during mealtime. So that's kind of how we treat how we one, we screen really well, and then we try to avoid the allergies as much as possible. Michelle, what's your question?
Okay, it might be kind of a dumb question, but
No.
and I don't know if you work primarily with only football players, but I was thinking back on what you said about giving all of them vitamin D, like a vitamin D supplement. Do you have to adjust based on how much, like, I guess, sun exposure? I feel like that's a really dumb question, but
No, no, not a dumb question at all. Um, with our guys right now, for instance, we're doing pretty a higher dose because they're only required to be, at the facility like 4 days a week. we're doing like 5,000 international units, knowing that, over the span of a week, because not everyone takes their supplement every single day, unfortunately.
Right.
Over the span of the week, it really evens out to probably about 2,000 IUs per day, which is a pretty, a reasonable maintenance dose. Because we are in Salt Lake City right now, and we do have snow on the ground. It can be pretty sunny here sometimes, but the guys are not outside hardly at all right now. We definitely increase that vitamin D during the winter, and then we would probably drop it down to a maintenance dose, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 during summer months. And
Gotcha.
we don't do any type of vitamin D testing right now. Basically, we're kind of falling in line with a lot of NFL standards. We're really seeing that they're moving away from some of those things because, from a cost standpoint, most people ended up needing vitamin D anyways. And so we're kind of just prophylactically going ahead and giving that to all the players. And they can opt out of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is anyone interested in working in football? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I quickly had a question. So as far as like education towards all of the players, is there like some like moments that you were like shocked that you would expect them to know by then? Kind of, I guess. Like, is there some stuff that like you kind of have to like keep on reminding them about nutrition?
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's really interesting because you go to school and you have all of this amazing knowledge. And right now I'm studying for the CSSD, Certified Specialist in Sports Dietetics. So there's all this high level knowledge that we're really expected to have. And some guys just don't like vegetables, or, they're like, I just don't eat breakfast, or, I was really hungry for dinner, but I was so tired from practice that I ended up just going to sleep instead. So um, it does end up being a little bit of hand holding sometimes, I'm not going to lie. And we're willing to do that, especially for a lot of our younger players. And we do try to help them develop skills so that they can eventually do a lot of these things on their own. So yes, I have been surprised sometimes by some of the lack of knowledge, but a lot of these kids come from very different backgrounds. Some people are very interested in nutrition and some athletes aren't. It's really more of I know I have to eat, so I do. Um, but yeah, so it's definitely been, sometimes I have to remind myself to like, okay, tone down the science, and really just try to meet them wherever they're at. Michelle.
Okay, for some reason we were talking about like some people not liking vegetables, and I thought like a lot of people, especially like younger people, don't put a lot of importance in hydration, especially water. And I
Mm.
know working with athletes, you might get a lot of, Gatorades and stuff like that for like electrolyte replenishment. How do you how do you tackle like the hydration aspect of it all? Because I feel like some people just do not like the taste of water. So it's really, I could imagine, especially in the athlete population, that being really challenging if they don't like the taste of water.
Yeah, absolutely. And in our program, our head coach is really big on hydration. So for instance, like, yeah, one thing that we do on the road is we actually hydration test before we even leave, for our games. Or like at the Rose Bowl, we actually hydration tested twice to make sure that they were actually, and these are all urine samples that we're actually doing, refractometer to make sure that they're, is urine specific gravity to make sure they're actually hydrated. Um, right now during this winter conditioning season, we actually do a 5-minute team talk before their lifting session. And so, for example, the last 2 weeks we talked about hydration. So our first week we talked about, okay, what are the hydration products that we offer? So things like water, Propel, Gatorade, Gatorlyte, our electrolyte packets, and when would be a good time to use each of these. And then this past week we covered how much fluid should we be drinking per day. So I don't love that a lot of our guys sip on Gatorade during the day just as a regular beverage because in my opinion, I'd rather them just eat more carbs and salt their food. But for guys who maybe, like you said, don't like the taste of water, I'd much prefer that they have that additional hydration than not drinking anything at all. And we have some like little Propel packets down in our fuel station. So a lot of the guys really like those to kind of enhance the flavor of the water while they're kind of learning to like that taste. Most of them do a pretty good job because we do offer water and Gatorade at practice. So because of that, most of them start to like it pretty quickly.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Well, is it Santi or Snotty?
Yes, if you can hear me, this is Snotty speaking.
Snotty. Oh, love it. How are you?
Uh, I'm well, thank you. Great advice so far. I have two questions.
Yeah.
Since you just mentioned the hydration piece, I'm curious as to whether you've ever considered um fruit infused water in addition to the electrolyte packages that you just described. Because excuse me, as somebody who's considering getting a sports nutrition or sports dietitian certification in my own right, I just graduated as an exercise science major.
Oh,
Um, I would like to consider like taking as many fruits as possible that we need to be eating anyway, like strawberries, blueberries, and the like, and actually putting that in pitchers of water,
hmm.
like whether for a couple of hours or overnight, and then giving that to the athletes.
Yeah.
Perhaps I don't know whether that would be a reduction in sugar or given, the same amount of electrolytes as Gatorade. I was just wondering as to whether that would be an option, or would you consider just the known products for hydration?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I probably haven't touched as much on our, all athlete dining hall, but that's something that our chefs do offer, which is great. Some of those fruit infused waters. They do it a little bit more during the summer. Probably, I think the guys are just a little more willing to take it at that time, but it is something
Hmm.
that they offer. And I think that's a great idea of, yeah, like you said, bridging the gap between maybe for a lot of those guys, maybe for our lean guys in particular, reducing some of those sugar sweetened beverages that they just don't need outside of the times that they're training. So it's a great option.
Okay.
And yeah, something that we're not able to do down in our fueling station, from like our football only fueling station, only because it's meant to be more of that kind of grab and go smaller area. But they're able to do that at the dining hall for sure.
Okay. All right, great. And my second question is, um, at Utah, do you collaborate with the strength and conditioning coaches at all as far as um I guess the year-round diet plans as far as off season, summer, and then ultimately in season?
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. So we nutrition and strength and conditioning work really, really closely together. So there's kind of a shared ownership between nutrition and strength and conditioning about these body composition changes that I mentioned. So as an example, in about 3 hours, both myself and the director of nutrition will be meeting with our strength conditioning staff to review those body weights before we present them to the coaches. Um, and the good thing is that now, well, I'll go back a little bit. Prior to about 2013, 2014, dietitians in the collegiate space were a little bit more few and far between. That's before the deregulation of feeding. So basically, there was a time period when the NCAA really limited the type of nutrition resources that could be provided to athletes. Once they really pulled back on a lot of those regulations, then we saw sports dietitians flood the space. So for a long time,
Okay.
strength and conditioning staff actually took the role of the dietitian. Um, doing a lot of the sports nutrition education before full-time dietitians kind of came on board. So there's a little bit of a history between, strength and conditioning coaches and dietitians kind of butting heads a little bit. But here, I think that we've really developed the relationship with our strength and conditioning staff so that they respect what we do, and they kind of let us do our thing, and they more or less say like, hey, this guy in the weight room is actually looking really sluggish. We really expected that his numbers would be higher. He looks
Okay.
tired or whatever. So yeah, it is very, very collaborative for sure.
Okay. So based just to make sure I'm understanding, based on that feedback, you will individualize the diet plans for those particular athletes.
Yep, yep. And very rarely do we give a prescribed, like, here's your 4,000 calorie meal plan. Mostly what we try to do is, sit down with an athlete, look at what does your current typical daily intake look like, and then how can we make some small adjustments to get you to wherever you need to go.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
One last question regarding the players once they receive their plans. Is it also a regular occurrence, even with the meal plans given to the athletes, that they either underconsume or overconsume certain nutrients that ultimately affect their performance?
Yeah, I would say, it kind of depends on the player. For a lot of our guys, um, I would say some over reliance on quick foods, particularly things like fast food, type items. That's probably an area that is not quite so great for their performance. A lot of guys really push protein, particularly when they're trying to gain weight, but almost to their detriment. We know that protein is quite filling, and there is an increased thermogenic effect with protein. So a lot of our guys, we actually have to pull back on the protein a little bit and make sure they're actually optimizing their carbohydrates, and good quality fats. A lot of them are getting plenty of fat, but it can come from a lot of, not quite as favorable, a lot of, packaged items, fried foods, etc. So
Okay.
we're trying to help them in other ways. As an example, in our weight gain shakes, we use oats and frozen avocado and olive oil to help increase the calories and carbs.
Hmm.
So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just thought of another question as well. Since you did start in like Georgia and everything, and then when you went to Colorado, how did like I guess since licensing is different, I guess in state to state, how is it like? Did you have? I know you just said you were going for like another certificate. Did that have to do with it, like because you changed state to state, or?
Yeah, no. So yeah, licensure is a really interesting thing. So even, it's funny because even though I'm not living in Georgia, I continue to maintain my Georgia license so that I can, because occasionally, especially back in Colorado, I was doing a lot of individual consulting with athletes, with whom I developed relationships with in Georgia. So I wanted to be able to make sure that that was all legal. In Colorado, there is no licensure law for dietitians. So I didn't have to obtain any, it's kind of, I would call it the Wild West, because in Colorado, anybody can do nutrition services. There are no restrictions. Utah is much more like Georgia. So whenever I got here, I had to apply for licensure here. It's really easy. Basically you submit your CDR verification, and some other type things. And it's very, very easy to generally to obtain a licensure if you've already been a dietitian before and already practiced before. And the CSSD, that's just an additional certification to it kind of it's the gold standard within sports nutrition. So if for some reason I were to leave Utah, you know, and was, you know, if you're looking for, some people will flat out just not even look at anyone who's not a certified specialist in sports dietetics. So it really is, in my opinion, what every aspiring sports dietitian should be working towards. And it's not the easiest test. It's actually probably harder, from what I've heard, than the RD exam. And you have to be a dietitian for at least 2 years before you can even take it. And you have to have 2,000 hours. So you actually have to have more hours to become a specialist in sports dietetics than you do to actually become a dietitian, which is kind of interesting.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that they had a specific testing for sports dietetics, and I didn't know it'd be more rigorous. And I think that's really interesting. Are there any more specialties that are like that? Like eating disorder special? Do you know if there's
Most of them are, yeah. So if you go to the CDR website, you can actually, they have probably, I think like 6 or 7, it could be even more now, certifications that are those kind of specialty type things. Like, you know, they have an adult weight management, and they have a renal dietitian, pediatrics, eating disorder, sports dietetics. So there's definitely quite a lot. And most of
and
them are pretty rigorous.
is it like a course, or are you just studying up for the exam and you're just doing whatever you can to like find resources?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
most of those exams will have some kind of like, hey, here's a list of 10 resources that we suggest making sure that you're familiar with on the test. And some companies will actually provide some resources for that. So, as an example, my sports dietitian actually has a course that you can take that helps prepare you for that exam. It's not something that the academy or CDR is in charge of, but kind of other people have recognized that, hey, this is a really difficult exam, and people probably want to learn how to take this and do well the first time, so they don't have to keep taking it, because there is a fee associated with it. Yep. So yeah. Awesome. One, if any questions pop up that you haven't thought about or maybe didn't want to ask, please feel free to email me or text me, whatever. If you wanted to do any type of virtual shadowing or anything like that, please let me know. You know, I think I was able to get to where I am because other dietitians said, hey, sure, you know, um, please feel free to volunteer. And it does take some time to coordinate with another volunteer and things like that, and provide some of that mentorship. So I would like to pay it forward. So if you all need anything, please let me know. And that's also another good point I think I would add is, if you are looking to provide some experience and maybe you're just kind of cold emailing someone saying, hey, I'd love to get some experience here, make sure that you highlight not only what you want to get out of it, but what services you can provide. You know, for instance, if you're really good at Canva or creating certain materials, say, hey, this is a, you know, a skill that I'm really good at. I'd love to provide some of these things for you or whatever.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll share, or does anyone else have any questions?
No, I was just gonna say I really enjoy that too because I met Kelsey through a coach of mine in high school when I would run. And so I think it's just all about like making your connections. And I'm just always thankful that my coach introduced me to Kelsey because it's why I wanted to go into Georgia State. So
Yeah. And go Panthers.
Yes. I'll share your email with NSN in general. So if anyone couldn't come to the meeting, they'll still be able to contact you.
Yeah.
But yeah, any more questions before we wrap this up? I don't think so.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you guys have asked great questions. Yeah, no, I know not everyone is probably interested in sports nutrition, but there's a lot of great. I've done a little bit of everything. So even if you weren't necessarily interested in sports, but maybe clinical or pediatric, just let me know. Got a lot of good connections still down in Atlanta, so happy to help anyone out.
Oh, I have one quick question before you
Yeah.
leave. Um, very quickly, I don't know how often you lecture the football team, like in the meeting room, like as an entire team, but when you do so, how often do you stress the concept of functional medicine or food being medicine in and of itself, and like trying to emphasize to the players to get as much of what they need within food as possible before going to the supplements or anything else.
Yeah, we're definitely a food first. Um, we definitely have a food first philosophy, and so I always say, it's interesting because with our athletes nowadays, with having a lot of NIL deals, which if you guys aren't familiar, NIL stands for name, image, likeness. So, players can continue their amateur status, but actually receive, finances for certain deals that they have, partnerships, sponsorships, etc. Um, so guys have varying levels of finances. Some guys, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other because they can purchase whatever food or supplements they have. They don't have many financial restrictions. But some guys are pretty strapped. They're kind of living that more traditional, college lifestyle. Especially a lot of our scout players, walk-ons and things. So we definitely try to emphasize, hey, food first approach, and we use the idea of, hey, save your money. Really, save your money. Spend whatever you might normally spend on this supplement. And if it's a greens powder, I'd much rather you purchase more broccoli and spinach than go for the greens powder.
Mm.
That kind of thing. So yeah, you always have, the big thing is trying to see what really motivates them. So that's why I brought up the financial thing, is like, hey, finances motivate people. Performance motivates them. Making things easier for them motivates them. So, yeah, that's kind of how we try to emphasize it and spin it in a way that relates to them.
Okay, understood. All right, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for showing up, Kelsey. This was awesome.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you everyone so much. And sorry for the hiccup earlier, but glad
It's
we were able to
completely fine.
all meet.
We've never had somebody out of state before, so I didn't know. I forgot that I had to specify. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
And it's funny because I actually, I did so much virtual consulting that I typically am super aware of it, and then just it slipped my mind. So
Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you
Right.
guys for having
Thank
me. I
you.
really, really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully I'll see